Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Brothers in Business podcast. Today we want to do a real deep dive into the importance of taking accountability for your actions. It's such an overlooked subject in today's day and age where everybody tries to blame everyone else for their problems, and we want to deep dive the topic today and show why it is so important to take accountability for your own actions. So lead us off.
Lead us into the void.
Give us a time where you felt you really had to take some accountability for your own actions.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've mentioned it before. I mean, most of the things that have come from anything recent is more work-based, where, you know, there's been an issue, you know, something more recently where there's a problem that's occurred and, you know, there might have been a mistake, may or may not be from me. And, you know, you got to look at it and go, flipping hell, yeah, that got to hold my hands up and sort the problem out, as opposed to blaming other people and say, oh no, that was them, that was him, that was her, that was this. Because in today's culture, like you've said, it's very much a don't worry, it can't be your fault, it's someone else's fault, rather than taking accountability.
People forget the biggest blessing in taking accountability for their own actions is the lesson that you learn from it. If you go through life blaming everybody else for things that occur either to you, because of you, or even around you that might not have any impact on your own life, then you don't get to take advantage of the lessons that can be learned. So, you know, as you're growing up as a kid, you know, it's one of those things that you might start learning to ride a bike. And for the first time, you might take the stabilizers off. And you're now riding on your own, and all of a sudden you fall over. Now, to be honest, most kids might turn around and sort of point at their parent who's taking the stabilizers off, cry their eyes out and give them grief. But the reality is they haven't pushed them over. They've fallen over on their own. And the whole point is they needed to get up, get back on the bike and think, what did I do to make this bike fall over? Because I wasn't pushed. Nobody caused this problem to happen but me. So how am I going to learn to prevent it from happening again? And that, for some reason, we do really well as kids. Yes, at first we'll have a cry and a moan, but then we'll get back on the bike, the proverbial horse, whatever you want to call it, and try again, learn from the lessons. And then once we've passed it and we've stopped falling off our bike, you become braver, and then you try new things. And I remember going out on my bike all the time, and, you know, in Sutton Park, and we'd sort of go down this really steep ramp, and I flew over the front of the handlebars about 4 times, and you come back in a bloody brace and a cast, and you break bones. But you learn from them. You learn from those lessons, and then you take them into your future, and it's really important.
I think that's how anyone grows from, you know, sport and things like that as well. Like, you know, when we used to go and play tennis or play football or play anything really, and I'd win some, you'd win some, but
I'd win more.
You'd like to say, but you'd learn more from a loss than you would from the win, because you think, oh my God, especially when we're obviously both competitive, you don't want to lose again. So you think, shit, like my serve's rubbish, or like my forehand needs some work, and then you'll try really hard to then practice and work on that. Whereas if you didn't have any accountability and you're like, well, it was the wind took the ball, you know, nothing that I did. It's like, the lines moved. Always the umpire, not that we're that good, but, you know, it's someone else has made a bad decision, or the circumstances, like you say, yeah, you're putting the blame off, and then if you're not going to then address it yourself, you're never going to get any better.
And that is literally what it's all about. And, you know, as a kid, you are trying to get better. You're learning every single day. You're learning, and you're learning from your mistakes. You're learning new skills, to walk for the first time, ride a bike for the first time, to swim for the first time. I know some people that still can't swim, which is just mind blowing.
I know one or two, yeah.
It's one of those things that you just go through life, and people, once they leave school, they think to themselves, I'm going to stop learning because I'm afraid to make the mistakes, and they become fearful that anything that they get wrong, they become ashamed of the fact that they don't know that particular thing. So, for example, learning to swim. It's almost like they'll never get into a swimming pool because they're too ashamed of what people might think, rather than just going into the pool, diving in at the deep end. Yes, sort of hopefully not drowning, but sort of learning through failure and having people help you and putting your hand up and having the humility to say, do you know what? I actually don't know the answer to that, and I want to find out. And again, it's something that is sort of plagued later on in school, you know, and it's such a weird sort of thing that happens as you grow older, is that you do become more wary of wanting to not admit you're wrong or wanting to admit you don't know something. So you just go along with it and you'll just make out like you know everything, where you'd be so much better off in life if you just put your hand up and just said, I don't know that. Or explain it further. You know, sometimes somebody might use a word that you've never heard before, but rather than actually ask what it means, they just sort of nod their head and don't ever think to learn something from it.
I mean, some advice I'd say would be, you know, say you were playing or a sport or you were doing something, the person that has pointed out that you've done something wrong, genuinely, it's probably going to come from a place of care, you'd have thought. So instead of again go, no, it wasn't me, or it's not this, it's not that, you maybe just ask them, what do you think that, you know, you've done wrong, and try and get other advice from the person that's either witnessed that something you've done. They might give you something that's helpful to learn from. It's
a big mindset shift. So for me, going into boxing was a big shift for me, and having a coach. And boxing's quite a brutal sport, obviously. So if you get something wrong, you get punched in the face. So it's one of those things where you need to have your guard up at all times. You need to have your chin tucked. You need to have your feet in the right position. There's so much to think about. But if my coach, when I first started and I was prepping for my first fight, if he took the sort of mindset where, you know, he didn't want to punish me for making mistakes, he didn't want me to be accountable for the mistakes that I was making, every time I drop my hands, he might not say something and he'll just let me have my hands dropped. Every time my feet were in the wrong position, he'd just ignore it. Every time my chin wasn't tucked, he'd just ignore it. But then what had happened on fight night, my hands would be down, my feet would be in the wrong place, I'd be all over the place and I'd get knocked out and embarrassed in front of a large crowd, which no one wants. So instead of that, you know, a good friend might actually sort of say something where they don't want to be rude, but they'll check you on these things, and a good coach will also do the same, where if you are making mistakes or if you are going wrong, they'll actively help you and try and guide you. And then if you're big enough as a person, you'll be receptive to that and actively want to learn and listen, because that's how you grow.
Yeah, and I think, well, this is what good parents do and good teachers at school do. The whole point is, I suppose, to bring you up in a way where, you know, if you do make a mistake, you're there to be taught the right way. And I think, you know, teachers have probably got it a bit hard at the minute with, you know, some of the things that go on in the classroom. But, you know, that it comes from a good place and they're only trying to help teach you the right way and how to own up probably to the mistakes you might have made.
Well, you've touched on a really good point, and it does my nutting at the minute, and I know it does yours as well, with this modern day, and I'm sure it probably stems from this lack of accountability, but it's this, oh, it's okay, you've made a mistake, don't worry. It's like, no, hold on a minute. No, that's the worst thing you can say to someone. It's not okay. Overall, it's absolutely fine that we all make mistakes and we have to accept that the mistake has been made. But we have to point it out and say, look, hold on, let's rewind. You've made a mistake there. You need to fix that. You know, it's not, oh, it's all right, don't worry about it. Because then nobody's ever going to feel like they need to correct their mistakes, which again prevents people from growing. So what you end up getting is a bunch of sort of entitled kids, or a generation of entitled people, brats, yeah, is a good way of putting it, where they think they're right all the time. I'm guilty of that one. They think they're right all the time, but they have no interest in being told they're wrong, or they have no interest in trying to learn anything new. They just think that they're God's gift and they have no reason to continue learning or change anything that they're doing because they know best already. And it's such a destructive and bad mindset to go into. If you ever feel like you need to be successful, you need to know how to take criticism, constructive criticism, and then use it to grow or to learn.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you're going through life and then you just think that, you know, everything's everyone else's fault and, you know, you're perfect, I suppose, when the day does come where something happens and you have got no one else to blame but yourself, it's going to be a big one, and it's going to, like, really hurt, because not only have you thought it's going to have been someone else this whole time, you then have only got one person to look at, and it's going to sting, I'd have thought.
A really nice one for that. I remember a story, Ian Wright, who used to play for Arsenal, and I think it was at the time where Arsene Wenger had just come in to start managing the club, and he was saying that he wanted to completely change the way that Arsenal played the game and make every single player accountable for the results on the pitch. And that must be so much harder, because obviously you've got 11 people on a pitch that all need to perform, that are all accountable for the result. But then you've also got the subs, you've got the whole squad behind the active players on the pitch at the time, who all need to buy into this vision that of Arsenal at the time were going on to be Premier League champions, which is the most competitive football league in the world, in the most competitive sport in the world. It's the largest sport, second to none. And Arsenal wanted to go on and win the whole thing, and they ended up doing it, being the first team ever to do it without losing a game, which is just an insane achievement. And it got there through Arsene Wenger instilling this level of accountability into all of the players. And the one of them was diet. And he said that I want everybody to cut certain foods out, certain sugars out, and I want everybody to go onto this particular diet to make sure you're all match fit and that you're all outperforming the competition. And he turned to, obviously, all the players, made them a strict sort of diet plan. And when they'd gone on to, like, let's say, an international game day, Ian Wright's gone into a room with Dennis Bergkamp, I believe it was. And Ian Wright tells his story, so obviously he'll tell it a lot better than me, so just have a look at it. But he spoke to his teammate and he'd snuck in like a Twix bar, or he'd snuck in some chocolate. And obviously he's thinking he's got one over on the manager, and he's been able to, you know, sort of try and sneak some chocolate in and go against the wishes of the manager. And Dennis Bergkamp turned around to him and said, like, how dare you? You know, how dare you ruin our entire team's self-accountability? We're all here pushing to win the league, pushing to be the best, and you're the only person that hasn't got the self-control to go a few days without a chocolate bar. You need to be more accountable for your actions. And the look on his face when he was telling the story, you could tell he was still haunted by it. And it's just a really powerful sort of story to think about how, if you want to be the best, if you want to achieve anything, you do have to be super critical and self-accountable.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's again a great example, and you can imagine it with most sports people that are of the top of their game, because you cannot get to that sort of level by just blaming other people. You know, you have to do these things yourself. And if you're going to just blame others, then you're never going to amount to or get anywhere, because, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo or someone like that, you know, there's no way in the world he's like kicking a football and then blaming the referee or something, or like blame. I mean, sometimes they do have a bit of a mare when they run over the ball, but I'm sure even then, you know, he's still going, he's going to blame himself and think, oh, I shouldn't have gone that way. I should have looked over my shoulder. I should have done this. I should have done that. Not, oh, well, it was someone else's fault.
You can tell by his reaction sometimes to when he's clearly responsible for making an error, and you can just see the look in his face, can't you? You can tell that, you can see the disappointment, the rage and the fury that he's obviously just got inside himself for making that mistake, because he knows he's better than it and he holds himself to a higher standard. And that's another really important one, is you should all set yourself a standard as to where you want to be. You know, I tell our team at work, you know, you can either be average, you can be good, great, or you can be the best. If you want to be the best, you've got to behave like the best. You've got to treat yourself and hold yourself to the highest possible standard. And you'll also reap the rewards from doing that. But if you want to just be average, then it's just, Who cares? I'll just be the same as everyone else. I don't need to hold myself to a higher standard. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, I suppose. But being the Brothers in Business podcast, this isn't brothers in business running a mediocre sort of small business where it's just the same average, and that's what we strive for. We strive to be the best, and we hold ourselves to that higher standard.
Yeah, and I remember there's a story that we heard from Jamal Qureshi, and he sort of said that, there was a number 4 golfer, and you know the story better than me, but he's a number 4 golfer, and he's saying, wake up today, now you're number 1, like what you're going to do now, number 1. It's like that whole mindset switch of to be number 1 of what he's got to do, and are you going to have that fizzy drink? And he's like, well, probably not today. Like, I'm number 1. I've got to stay. I'll probably just have a water today now. It's like, oh, well, you're going to go out with your mates tonight, weren't you, and have a few drinks? You're still going to do that number 1? It's like, oh, probably not. Probably need an early night.
It's a big mindset switch for people that want to be the best, and it's tough. Like, it's really tough because people kid themselves nowadays and say, I want to be a millionaire. I don't think you do, because the work it takes to get there, unless you win the lottery, which even then you're going to end up losing it. It's one of those things you aren't going to get there, because to become a millionaire requires sacrifice. It requires self-determination. It requires so many different things, long-term mindset, having a plan, and learning is the number 1 thing. And people just aren't bothered about doing it. But obviously I'm hoping that everybody that's watching this are the type of people that are striving for that level of success, because that's what gets me up in the morning. And every time I wake up and then go to bed at night, I do like a self-performance review. I do think to myself, what have I done today? I'll hold myself accountable for that day. Have I found myself veering away from what I should have been doing? And if I have, I need to course correct the next day. And having that level of self-accountability will allow you to push on to that level of success that I certainly want to achieve and have achieved, same as you.
I think as well, I mean, one of the weirdest sort of comparisons I'm going to make now is, but you do see it in there as well, but I'm a celebrity, that's all going on at the minute. And, there's a guy that kept getting picked on for the trials, Dean. And I don't, you haven't watched any of it, have you?
No, I'm not into it this year.
But he goes in and he keeps getting picked for the trials because he's just screaming at like everything. And he goes in, like the first trial he's done, he's got like 2 or 3 stars. And because he screamed so much, he's obviously got picked again and again and again and again. He keeps getting picked. But you know what? You can't knock the guy for fair play. He first time he went in and he sort of screamed and it was all a bit hilarious. But the next time he went in, he got like 5. The next time I think he got about 7. And then one of the most recent ones, he got about 9, something like that. Now, he's obviously trying to better himself and thought about it and gone, you know what, like, I need to feed my camp. I need to be accountable here, because it's not, they're going to starve to death. They're going to have rice and beans for like the next God knows how many days. And you can see it within someone that when they do start to take accountability, that they can actually excel and learn from it and better themselves.
See, here's one for you. See, I'm so doubtful now of everything in the
media. I really
media.
want you to watch it.
No, it's not that. It's everything that I see in the media, I just tend to second guess now. So for me, for example, especially on these reality shows, because my mate used to work in TV, and when you watch these shows, trust me, they're the most staged, pre-recorded, preset and predetermined shows you will ever watch. They are not natural or authentic in the slightest. So imagine, right, he knows going into that show, to get the most airtime, he needs to do challenges. So as he's doing the challenges, if he just sort of mans it and just makes no reaction, bosses through the whole thing, then he's easily just going to go for the whole challenge and no one's going to give him another one because they just think he's not fazed by it. But if he just puts on an act, behaves like, I was going to say a big girl, but I'm going to stick with it. Sorry for the misogyny comment, as everyone's going to jump on me for. But behaves like a big girl, then unfortunately he's just going to get picked. But he might be doing it on purpose to get the free airtime.
He might be, but he did have to eat like a kangaroo's testicle. I'm sure he did at some point. So, but no, 100, I do agree. And that is going to be like, the script for it most times. I think he's going to have been a good actor if he was putting it on the whole. I mean, he's been voted out now, so he's been voted for all the trials, and then he's been kicked out.
But you're talking about it.
I know, agreed.
So if he was self-accountable and he thought to himself, even if he didn't tell anyone, and he's thought, do you know what? I'm going to be self-accountable. I've looked around me and I've seen the previous shows, and the ones that get the challenges are the ones that are clearly putting on a right show and making the whole thing, you know, a right sort of like pantomime performance during it. If he's done that knowingly and gone in, he's a smarter guy, because I do remember watching a percentage of, I think it was last year's when Nigel Farage was on, and he outwardly said on camera that some of the things that he was saying and doing would get him more airtime.
Yeah. Well, it's like Love Island, isn't it? You know, there's been things that come out on that, and you think it's all just so and so talking to so and so by the fire or whatever, and it's like, you know, they tell them to do that. They literally say, "Can Johnny go and speak with Sarah by the fire?" and talk about Roger the corner.
I hope they're not in Love Island, but no, it's true. But right, back to accountability. I think, what are some of the things that you do then to hold yourself accountable when either you're at work or you're at home or in a sport or hobby? What are some of the things that you can sort of share to help people?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing for me is always just making lists, checking them twice, all that sort of stuff. But no, it's about making a list, and then putting dates against it is a big one. So it's all good and well making a list and say you're going to do X, Y, and Z, but to really hold yourself to account, if you put a date in and then check back to it, you're going to know you're only just doubting yourself and just knocking yourself if you're not actually going to do it. So you can always change it if you really have to, but you know, maybe if you do, add a note, why did you change it, what happened, and then try and do it either the following week or something like that. But yeah, making a list and then putting dates against that list and the things you've said.
I mean, you love a list.
I do love a list
to your answers to everything. Just make a list.
I have to put one up the chimney in a couple of weeks.
yeah. Good timing. I don't think you deserve any presents this year. But yeah, no, for me, I think having a forfeit when you've set yourself a goal or a target.
It's like a dodgy drinking game or something.
Well, take a shot could be a good one anyway. Actually, it's not a bad forfeit. But I mean that every time you set yourself a goal, and look, the people that do this are only going to be the ones that actually achieve the success. And the people that set themselves a goal and don't bother getting round to it, well, you know, I'm sorry to say, good luck, because it'll take you like 100 lifetimes to ever achieve any level of success, because sitting on your arse is never going to get you there. So if you set yourself a goal or a target for something and you find yourself, you know, not quite achieving what you said you'd set out to, use a forfeit. So if, for example, using the gym is always an easy one. If you said, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, I've paid for my gym membership, so that's already done and dusted. And you said, right, every time I miss a session, I'm going to give £50 to charity or £100 or whatever sum of money is enough to make you sort of, you know, feel a bit uneasy. So, I mean, you don't have to give it to charity, give it to a friend, give it to a partner, invest it in something, whatever. But make sure you are creating the forfeit painful enough that you really don't want it to happen. Because otherwise, you'll just set yourself the target 3 times a week to go to the gym, and then you don't go 1 time and you'll find an excuse. And you'll find an excuse that really you knew you could have gone, but I'm really tired. Oh, I've had a bad day. I'm a bit under the weather. I'm not feeling the best today. Or I've had a really bad day at work. And they're all just stupid excuses. And you allow yourselves, and most people allow themselves to give into those excuses, and they'll convince themselves of the excuse. And they'll think, do you know what? Actually, no, I am feeling ill. Do you know what? I deserve a day off. And it's like, you don't deserve a day off at all. Go to the gym. Stop. You're only letting yourself down. And again, this level of accountability, it's people are just too happy to give into their own excuses, and they will never get anywhere in life when they do it. So having a forfeit, whether it's a financial forfeit or taking a shot like you said or something.
Plunge pool
is another good one. Yeah, anything like that where it's an uncomfortable outcome, where if you don't do what you told yourself or promised yourself that you were going to do, you have got to give that forfeit. You've got to do that forfeit or get somebody else to do it for you. You know, like you said, when you've got a coach or a friend holding you accountable for you, it does help a great deal. But if you are actively in a position where you create that bit of pain for yourself, trust me when I say you will find achieving or adhering to those goals that you've set yourselves so much easier.
Well, again, you touched on it earlier with having a mentor, and I had one when I was on a diet. I did it with my friend, so again, there was that air of competition as well. But, you know, I wanted to lose a bit of weight going on holiday. But when you're paying for someone to give you a service and every week you've got, oh, could you send your weight and your photos and all that sort of stuff, you're way more likely to follow through with something if you've got someone holding you to account. So again, it's another big point and another option to some people, depending on, you know, people can afford it, is to get someone to hold you to account. I mean, nearly most people do it. If you're going to go to the gym, you get a PT. You know, people wouldn't pay for PTs if they didn't work, and most of them do. Even if they're bad at PTing, it's still someone there that you're paying to hold you to account.
That is the biggest part of PTing, is the biggest part of coaching, is obviously once you get to the top end, but even professional athletes, you know, you look at some of the fighters or top sportsmen, you know, they do reach a point where they feel like they've earned the money and they've got to that level now after they've set their sights on achieving top level in that sport, and then they start to drop off. I mean, Gareth Bale was a big one. He was naturally so full of talent, but then he got to the point where he just couldn't be bothered anymore. He'd given up on the sport and started to play golf, and you can see what happened to him. Obviously still one of the best footballers of our generation, but it got to the point where his mindset completely shifted over somewhere else, and he just got benched for every game, still getting £100 million a year. So, you know,
Conor McGregor been another one.
Yeah, Conor McGregor's another big one. But I think you just need to start to think in, you know, in the same fashion, if you were, let's say, a smoker, or if you were, you know, severely overweight and the doctors have told you, you know, another cigarette or another Krispy Kreme donut and you're brown bread, do you know what I mean? That's it for you. Your life's over. You'd stop smoking tomorrow. You'd never smoke it. Or if somebody said, if you light this cigarette, it's going to blow up in your face and you will die immediately the second you're not going to smoke a cigarette. It's just not going to happen. You will not do it. Provided you know sort of with full certainty that is going to happen. You'd never light another cigarette ever in your life. And you need to understand that self-accountability leads to you learning lessons that help you grow in your own life forever. You know, those lessons you'll take with you into the rest of your life. So learn them young, learn them quickly. Don't wait until you're 40 to decide it's time for you to start being responsible and actually taking account for your own actions. Blame yourself for everything. Even if something's not your fault, find your blame. We have to do it. You know, when we're employing sort of our own team and we run a business like we do, and something happens, everything that occurs in that business is our fault. I take direct blame for everything that happens because I employ the staff. I train the staff. I'm responsible for the staff and what they do. Now, obviously, the reality is one of them could come in and send an email to the wrong person or do something wrong. Is that my fault? No, it's not. But if I blame myself for it, I will think, right, how can I prevent that from happening again? Put a system in place so that no one can ever send an email to the wrong person or make it sort of so it's incredibly difficult. I've now blamed myself, I've taken action, I've improved it, and it will never happen again. If I just pointed and blamed that one member of staff and sort of gave them a telling off, it could happen again the next week and again and again and again and again until somebody, i.e. me, takes the responsibility and the blame and puts it right and learns the lesson.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I like the thought process of just, I like the idea of how Jordan Peterson sometimes has put it in the past where, you know, if you want to get your foot on the ladder and start taking accountability for yourself, just tidy your own room and just start with that as the first step. And if you can tidy your own room, then you can tidy up your life long term.
It's a big jump. I mean, I get the premise behind it. I have heard him say that. And I think it's one of those, everybody's at different stages. And I think, you need to be self-critical with where you are. And if you're the type of person that can't even tidy their own room or make their own bed, start there. I'd like to hope that people listening are a bit further ahead, but start looking around you at work. It's one of those things that we have to do. If people around you at work are making mistakes on a daily basis, start thinking, how could you be responsible for that and fix it and put a process in place to make it better? And I guarantee you, if you were to go to your managers or your bosses and say, look, I've noticed the HR division keeps making this mistake and I think we should do this. I noticed the sales team aren't making enough conversions and I think if with a process, we could increase our sales by 20%. If you spoke to your management or your boss and did that, trust me when I say, if you ask them for a pay rise at the same time, they would bite your hand off every single time because they would see the value that you're offering. You're being self-accountable, you're looking for ways to improve, and you're adding value back into the business or to anybody around you. And trust me, it will pay itself back tenfold.
Anyone who's been with us that's come up with those sorts of suggestions has obviously reaped the reward.
100%. Right. Start taking accountability for yourselves. It's a problem. Honestly, it's something that our generation is plagued by. Blaming the government, blaming your boss, blaming your parents, blaming your upbringing. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Grow up. Genuinely, it's really important. And I hope some of the things that we've said today ring true and some of the exercises that you can do to actually start taking account for not only your own actions, but take it one step further. Start taking account for some of the people and their actions that are around you. And I promise you, it will have such a benefit to your life that you will see immediate returns. But I've been Tyler Barker.
I'm Cody Barker.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.